Hi boys and girls, it's me. And what you're looking at is part of my radio collection, but the radio I want to discuss is this one right here. It's a 1941 Zenith 6-tuber. It's got broadcast and shortwave band. I think the model number is 6S529. I've had this radio for quite a long time, and I bought it off eBay might have been close to 20 years ago. I'd like to share a little story about this radio with you. Alright, so here's the story about that radio. Basically, I used to keep it in my shop where I had my Hammerland up here on the shelf. And I was down here working, in the lair. I was working on a radio, and it was in the middle of winter. This is probably some 17, 18 years ago. It was very cold outside. I just left the room. I had the radio playing. I forgot what I had on the radio, but it was on and it was playing, and I just left the room. And I just got upstairs to check on Miss RW to see how she was doing or whatever. And I was probably upstairs for about 5 minutes or so, and then I came back down. And when I came back down, this whole room was just filled with smoke. And that Zenith that you just saw was just pouring smoke out of it. So, needless to say, I kind of ran up to it, immediately unplugged it from the socket. I grabbed the radio, I ran up the stairs and outside, and there's a table on my patio just outside the house, and I sat down on my patio, and I almost broke into tears because I just loved that radio to death. And it was kind of one of my first radios that I bought for myself when I got back in the hobby. So, well, here's what happened. Okay, what I have here on the bench is kind of an odd rendition of a 6X5. It's an old metal tube, but what happened was that in this particular radio, and this is there's actually a glass envelope under the metal, so whenever you have one of these metal tubes, that's what's literally lurking underneath. But this one didn't have the metal, it was just a glass 6X5. And what the 6X5 is a rectifier. A rectifier just simply takes your AC or line voltage and turns it into DC. Well, what I didn't know at that time was these 6X5 rectifier tubes are notorious for shorting out. And although I've never had one happen to me, but I also understand that from probably multiple sources. I can't tell you exactly how many, but I know it was at least 3, that the 6X4 tubes, which is also a rectifier, only it's a miniature tube, and they went a lot of hi-fi equipment. They did the same thing. They have a tendency to short out. So when my 6X5 shorted, what happened was this. Inside the radio had a transformer. Now, albeit this one's a little dirty and old, but this is actually I saved this. This is actually the transformer that was in that radio. It's not the exact one, but one like it. And what Zenith used to do was, now this is kind of weird. It didn't bolt to the chassis. What they had were these tabs, and you would actually insert it through slots that were probably pressed to have the holes in the chassis. And then you would just stick these tabs through there, I guess, during the production line, and then you would take a pair of pliers or whatever, or they had a fixture or something that would twist these tabs to hold the transformer in place. So again, when the 6X5 shorted out, and now this is upside down, like this sitting in the chassis, okay? So what happened was, when it shorted, the copper inside of here got very, very hot. And what Zenith did was, with these transformers and ones that are like that, they're potted in tar. So that's where all the smoke came from. It was tar just emanating from this, and went all over the top of the chassis and went inside the wooden cabinet in the radio, and just made a big mess. Okay, right now on the bench, what you see tilted sideways here, this is a radio that I'm working on for somebody. This is a Zenith 6S, trying to remember Yeah, 6S362 from 1939. You see I have it turned sideways. I've already done a great deal of work to the radio. Now, this radio does not have a 6X5, but I did a little modification to this radio that I did to my Zenith that's on the shelf in the other room. And let me turn this around so you can see what that is. Okay, so here's the chassis. And I got it turned over, and I've basically just about replaced every wax capacitor except for one, and that actually tested perfect. But we've got new caps in here for the filters, couplers, bypass. I think I replaced one resistor. If you see here, that's a brand new dial belt from Quality Radio Dial Belts out in Rhode Island. And I put that in there because there was no belt on this thing when I got it. There was just a string. I do a number of things to it. But now if you look over here, you'll see there's a fuse holder here. And that was definitely not on the radio when I got it. So what I do now is, on any radio that has a transformer, I add a fuse. Now, this particular radio does not belong to me. I asked the owner. The owner is basically give this away as a gift to a friend of his. And I spoke to him through an email. I said, look, I've done a lot of radios for this guy. And I said, look, you want me to add a fuse holder in the back? And he said, yes. And what I typically do is I add this fuse holder in place. Or what I do is I'll take some black shrink tubing that's big enough to cover a fuse, and I'll put that in the series from the electrical cord, or the 120 volts going in series to one, in this case, one of those solder lugs here. And that just adds protection to the radio. Now, this particular radio uses, I know some of you probably have flames coming out of your face, that I actually drilled a hole and mount that in there. Or you might be thinking, why didn't I just use safety caps? Okay, well, here's the reason why I don't use safety caps to something like this, especially that I'm going to give to somebody. First of all, 97 to 98% of the people that I would do that for would have no idea what a safety cap is. So God forbid something happened and it took out a safety capacitor, then they wouldn't know what to do with it. I'd have to, go to their house, take it apart or whatever, or they'd bring the thing over to me. A fuse is straightforward and simple. What I do is, up until you get to about, up to a 7-tube set, I'll use a 1 amp fuse. 8-tube sets or above, I'll use a 2 amp fuse. And I'll either drill this hole and mount it here, or I'll mount one under the chassis and not drill the hole. But the thing is that if it ever did blow the fuse, it's pretty straightforward. I mean, people know what a fuse is. They don't know what a safety cap is, okay? So although this is kind of sacrilegious to some people, understand that whoever's going to have this radio is going to want to play it, and they're going to want to play it for a long time. And if, God forbid, something happened, then the fuse would blow. They would just simply unscrew this, like so, and there you go. They would actually could either see that the wire is there, or they could check it with an ohmmeter if they have a voltometer. So this is why I do these things. Getting back to my Zenith, I didn't have a parts unit to take a transformer from. I couldn't find one right away, and ultimately I found a gentleman in California that had one new old stock on one of the antique radio forums from a long time ago in the early days of the internet. And I think I paid $70 or $80 from him, and it was brand new old stock in the box. So that radio has a 1 amp fuse. It has a strip or something like that here. And then I have the shrink tubing over it. And I even take a black pen and write the word fuse on it. So if I'm not here, I get hit by a bolt of lightning and someone, my wife sells the radio or whatever, and they'll get it, and if something goes wrong with it, they'll know what to look for. So it's a safety thing, all right? These radios are cool. They're fun to look at. They're fun to tour around. They're fun to show to everybody. And I know that's kind of sacrilegious to some people, but that's just how I roll. I think it's a bit of a sacrifice, but you know what? I think it's the right thing to do, and a lot of people agree with me. You don't have to agree with me. Last thing I have to do a bunch of these things to this radio yet. I'm going to add this. This is something I need to do. This is just a RCA plug to put in the back. Now, this radio did have a switch in the back that you could switch to a phono, and had Zenith's phono. This is just a cover where I got my finger that you would plug a Zenith photograph into. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a second hole next to the phonograph switch. This actually has two plugs in here that you would put the phonograph input in. And what I'll do is I'll just take some couple wires and just tie it into these two guys, and then I'll put a label on the switch. I also got to put a label over the fuse as well. And I still got to clean some controls and do an alignment on it. And it's getting close to the end of the line for this, so I can return to the owner. So, anyway, that's kind of if you want to call it anything else, that's my personal safety tip. So, anyway, thanks for tuning in, and take care. Stay warm, everybody. Bye!